Hi, I'm Clara Rose, and this is Influence Matters, the show where each week I share tips, tricks, tools, hacks, resources, whatever it is that you'd like to call them, to help savvy influence builders just like you to strategically and intentionally cultivate their influence. Because we know that that's how we organically generate leads for our business, ministry, cause, or brand. And that is why we're here today. So let's jump right into today's show. First off, I do have to say special thanks to our sponsor. So special thanks go out to Rosedale Publishing for sponsoring this show. They are a company that specializes in business books for professionals and entrepreneurs, and they make this show possible. Then, of course, I have to give a special shout out to the fine folks over at Tampa Bay Multimedia and WeBeam TV, where we are today, because they truly make it possible for us to be on air. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, so today we are going to start out like we most often do, unless we have a guest, which we don't today, with a question from someone just like you who sent it in to me. You can send your questions to hello@clararose.com, and you might get your question answered live on the show if you send that in. So let's get started on the question of the week. Okay, so today's question of the week is, I can't wait to get your new book, Consistency Matters. You are right, of course, but I find it hard to make myself be consistent. How do I go from starting strong to hanging in there? Signed, Anonymous. Well, my anonymous friend, it is something that many of us struggle with. Consistency in the things that we do that we want to be doing. So let's talk about that today. How can we go from starting strong to really being consistent until the point that it reaches habit, which takes us a little while to get there. So let's talk about some steps to getting us to that point. And thank you for the shout out about my book, Consistency Matters. I am super excited for that to be coming out in just a few short weeks. I'm going to keep you posted, of course. All right, so let's dive into some good stuff for today. First, I want to start by saying that it's so much about perspective. So when we understand why something is important and the benefit that it might offer us, then our perspective changes, and that new perspective gives us a greater power. So you might say that perspective matters, which interestingly is another book that is coming down the pike from me. So pro tip for you for today is get your head in the game first. Your perspective is going to influence your actions, and then consistency is going to do the rest. And we're going to hop into some good stuff about consistency, but that's your perspective is the starting point. Get your head right. Get your head in the game, because perspective is going to make a difference, and it does matter. Okay, let's really just dive into consistency. First of all, today we're going to talk about the power of consistency. So how consistency creates competence, and we're going to talk about how consistency creates something I like to call buffer, and then how consistency ultimately creates habits. And that's what we're really after. That's the power of consistency, that it indeed creates habits for us. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, Anything that we do consistently over time becomes habitual. Think about the things you do every day that you don't have to actually think about them. You just do them. I'm guessing the simple things like, you get up in the morning and you head to the coffee pot or the bathroom or whatever it is. You don't think about those things. You just do them. It's a habit. It's just a part of your life. And for some people, it's that they take their vitamins and they don't have to think about it. Or for some people, it's, that they call their mother on Mother's Day or whatever it is. Whatever you do consistently becomes habit, and that's the power of it. All right, let's see how we can create some competence first. As I said, we're going to start with consistency creates competence. So let's talk about that for a minute. So consistency creates competence. What I mean by that is it is going to take you through the 4 levels of creating competence. That's what consistency will do for you. So first step, of course, is the unconscious incompetence. Now, what does that mean? Unconscious incompetent just means, we've talked about this before, that you have no idea how much there is that you don't know about this topic. So any new thing, we have no idea how much it is that we don't know. And that's just called, in the learning cycle, that's called unconscious incompetence. Don't have a clue how much we don't know. Then we move on to the next phase of competence, which is conscious incompetence. And this is a scary place for some people. It's that moment that they realize how much it is that they don't know about a topic. This happens a lot when people take on something big, something new that's big. When you first learn to drive, or when you first started a new program at school. When you're first learning something big, you thought, oh my gosh, look at how much I don't know. And it could be a little overwhelming. And some people even quit at that stage. It's too overwhelming and they're like, I can't do this, I'm out. The next stage is conscious competence. Now, this stage means I can do it and I'm competent at it. So I liken this to driving. My granddaughter, who's second oldest of my grandchildren, is driving. Actually, both oldest are driving, but I'm going to talk about my granddaughter. She is competent behind the wheel when she drives, but she still has to think about everything. She's 16, and so it's like, okay, I'm going to turn here. She has to think. I'm going to turn on my blinker. I'm going to slow down. She has to think through the process, but she's competent. She's a safe driver, so I'm not uncomfortable being in the car with her. She knows what she's doing, but I don't want any music on, and we're not going to chit-chat about other things because she needs to concentrate on her driving. That's conscious competence. So you can do it. You know what you're talking about. You just have to think about it while you do it. Now, unconscious competence, that's where we really want to be when we're talking habits. We want to not have to think about our level of competence. So for instance, I've been driving for many, many years, so I am unconsciously competent. I can talk, listen to the radio, I can do other things, multitask a bit, and I'm still going to put on the blinker before I switch lanes or turn a corner. I'm still going to push on the gas to go and step on the brake to slow down. I don't have to think about those things. It's an unconscious action, and I'm competent at it. So it's just that level of not having to think about it. But consistency is what gets us to that level of competence. Now, here's a pro tip for you. We must push past the conscious incompetence phase if we're going to truly learn a new behavior. You've got to get to a point where it becomes actual habit that you don't have to think about anymore. As long as you're having to think about all of the steps towards something or give it conscious thought, it's not habit yet. It hasn't become something that's automatic. That doesn't require any of our brain power any longer. And it's easy to not push past that point. But think of it in this way. What if, as a new driver, you never practiced? You learned, got your driver's license, but then you never practiced it. Maybe once every 6 months you got behind the wheel. You'd probably be a little scary. I might not want to be on the road with you, but you still have to think about all of the pieces, all of the, what do I do next? So whatever it is, we really want to push past that conscious competence and into the the unconscious competence. I can do it and I don't have to think about it. That's where true habit really lives. When we get to that point, then we don't have to consciously think about making something happen. It's going to happen automatically. Actually that consistency creates new neural pathways that free up some other parts of our brain for some other stuff. And that happens to be the next thing that we're going to talk about. So let's move on to that next stage. Okay, so consistency creates a buffer. Now, some people say margin or headspace. I like to call it a buffer because that just makes sense to me. And that creates a space in your head, and it frees up your mind for creativity, and it gives you room to breathe. Consistency in something creates habit, which of course creates that buffer. Here's a pro tip for you on that. Give yourself space to contemplate and be creative. Busy is not a badge of honor, my friend. Unfortunately, I see it a lot in our society. How are you doing? Great, I'm busy, 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 busy. I think sometimes we are confused and we think that just because we're being busy that we're actually getting something accomplished. That's not necessarily always the case. In fact, if you don't create some margin or some buffer or some extra headspace, it's going to lead to forgetting things and even burnout. You have to create some buffer in your life, in your schedule, to allow room for other things to happen. Allow some room for some creativity. Allow some room for some breath. Now, Michael Hyatt, who I have followed for years and I love all of his books and I love his stuff, he calls it margin. And I liken that to like the margins on a book, inside a book. It's this white space that lives around the words so that the words don't spill off of the page, if you will. He calls it margin, giving that extra space for other things. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. A buffer between other things so that you don't have to give all of your energy to the same things, all the energy to that conscious, competent stuff that we're talking about. Now, buffer for you could mean something different than it does for me, but here's what I do for buffer in my world. My appointments are not back-to-back appointments. I have them scheduled at specific times on the clock, and then from the time that last appointment's over to the next appointment starting, there's a buffer. And luckily, my scheduler allows me to build that in. So when someone clicks on the link to get on my schedule, they can't get on my schedule during my buffer time. My scheduler doesn't allow it. So I know I always have a minimum of 15 minutes. Most of the time I have 30 minutes between my appointments. So that frees me up to allow for my previous appointment to go over by a few minutes if it needs to. It also frees me up to have a moment to grab a drink of water or go to the little girl's room or get a bite to eat or stand up and stretch. Especially right now, we're sitting in like Zoom fog, right? We're sitting behind the screen on Zoom so much that there's actually a term for getting tired from it. It's called Zoom fatigue. Right? So there's actually a medical term now because we're spending so much time on Zoom, we're becoming fatigued by it. Give yourself that 15 minutes or that 30 minutes to stand up, stretch, move around, get a different perspective, think, have a moment to breathe. That's the kind of buffer that I'm talking about. And surprise, surprise, I always get this from our office manager, Clara, you know you have control of your own schedule, right? So she says that anytime I've cut something a little too close and it's stressed me out, I have a moment where like, I gotta go, I'm running late kind of thing. You know you have control of your own schedule, right? Wise words from my friend Connie in the office. And she is right. And guess what? You also have control of your own schedule. Give yourself, even if you work for someone else, give yourself buffer. Give yourself some margin. If your work day is so structured and you work for someone else, that you can't give yourself margin during work, be sure and give yourself some margin before work or on your breaks, because we do get breaks, right? Give yourself some margin on your lunch hour, some time to just be, breathe, some time to maybe go for a 5-minute walk, just something where you can decompress. We're not running from one thing to the next. Being busy is not a badge of honor. Might be that you need to give yourself some margin in the evening. Maybe weekends are margin time. I know my husband and I both own our own businesses, so we do control our own schedules, and we have buffer at the beginning of the week and buffer at the end of the week. That gives us opportunity to not fall out of bed and hit the road running at the beginning of a new busy week, which can happen if you're an entrepreneur. Can I get an amen from all the entrepreneurs, right? We can make ourselves crazy just stuffing one more thing into our busy schedule, but we have control over that. So you don't have to do that to yourself. The end of the work week is also a beautiful place to have some buffer or some margin. So I know I don't ever work till 5 o'clock on a Friday. So if we want to leave town early or we want to do whatever early, we can. So the only thing that's a consistent on Friday is this show every Friday at 2 o'clock. That's a consistent for me because I want to be there for you and bring you good stuff. And that's the time of my show. But beyond that, I have that flexibility because I've built it into my world. Okay, enough about buffer. Let's move on just before we run out of time. I can't forget to talk about this. Let's talk about habit. Consistency is what is going to create your habits. Now, lots of science around this, but they say we only use 5 to 10% of our brain power for conscious thought in our day. So what we devote that time to makes a real difference, right? So if we only get 5 to 10% of our conscious brain power is involved in what we're doing, that means a whole lot of our brain is doing stuff without us, right? It's thinking stuff without us. Here's a pro tip for you. Use consistency to build the habits that are going to serve your goals and intentions and create buffer. Doesn't that just make good sense? Makes sense that we, as entrepreneurs or business professionals, that we free up our creative minds, that 5 to 10% that we're going to actually use that brain power for conscious thought, conscious actions, free that up for the good stuff. Put some of those other things into habit. And we know that consistency is what creates those habits. So how can we create habits? So we've talked about it just a little bit today. Talked about putting some buffer into our world, right? So that frees up some of our brain for the other stuff, right? If you're not so busy having to think about every single little action, it's going to free up some of that mind space. So that's one way that we can do it. And then, of course, we can create some consistency through competence, right? That competence that says, I can do this at the unconscious level and be competent at it. Now, I've talked a lot about driving as a example, but what other kinds of things might be unconscious competence? Well, if you create good habits around exercise, something that I am not all that great at personally, that I don't enjoy, and actually is on the goal for this year to become more consistent in that so that I can create some competence in it. I have to think about, when I work out, I have to think about it hard. I have to think about, okay, what machine am I at here? How much weight do I need on this? How do I do this correctly? How many reps should I do? If I do this wrong, am I going to hurt myself, right? Is this considered an upper body? Is this an ab? What am I supposed to be doing today? See, all these things that I just am not competent at, they require brain power. So when I'm thinking about going to the gym, I'm not only not looking forward to it, but I'm thinking, I don't know what the heck that I'm doing, right? So I'll never reach that point of being able to just go to the gym and jump in and do the workout until I create that habit that lets me not think about it. right? Does that make sense to you? What other kinds of things can we put into that same category? Well, if you get up in the morning and you make your coffee in a Keurig, which I do, I buy really good coffee. I make it a Keurig because I want it now and I don't want to wait. But my marketing mentor is like a coffee snob beyond me as a coffee snob. If you know me, you know that I am. He has one of those little machines. I don't remember what they're called, but you actually pour the water in the top and there's like this little spiral thing and it drips out the bottom. And, of course he does the bloom on the coffee so that you're, getting the best out of your coffee. It's kind of like a pour over, but it's a fancy little drip device that I don't know much about. I do pour overs occasionally if I have the time. We had this conversation last week. I said, gosh, isn't that a lot of work to make your coffee? And he's like, no, I don't even think about it. I've been doing it for so long that I don't even think about it. He buys the freshly roasted beans. He grinds them right before he uses them so that they're as fresh as they possibly could be. And he's got the measurements just right and the water at the right temperature. And he knows how long to let it bloom and he knows how long to let it drip. All of those things. But that doesn't require any brain power from him because he does it all the time and he has that level of unconscious competence. No, Clara, I don't have to think about it. I just do it. So my brain is doing other things while I'm doing it. And that is the point of the competence. That's the point of that whole piece of the exercise. When you get to the point where you don't have to put brain power into some things, it's freeing up brain power for other things. So here's a little exercise for you to do. Sit down and just jot with a pen and paper, pencil, paper, whatever you like to use, and jot a list for yourself. What kinds of things in my day could I work on being consistent at that would become habit? That is to say, I don't have to think about them consciously any longer because I'll just do it. And what value is that going to bring to me? Right? So it might be something having to do with your business. What could I do without having to put too much brain power into it that's going to almost automate, if you will? It's not truly automation because you still have to do that, right? That automation is something different. But if you can make it somehow that you don't have to think about it, your brain can be doing something else whilst you're doing that. So that's what I mean by competency and the consistency creating that competence, the value of that in the creating of a habit. We touched briefly on the neural pathways. There's a lot of science out there about this, and I'm by no means an expert in this particular field, but do some research and have a look at the science behind that. We actually, every time we do something, it creates a new pathway. So think about it like this. We have 2 dogs at our house, and they have a pattern when they run outside. They run out through the pool cage, or around the pineapple flower bed, or around the trees. They have this little loop that they do. They're good-sized dogs. And there's a path. There's a path where there's no longer grass. There's no longer any life. It's just dirt where they go around the pineapples, around the palm trees. There's this little path that they've worn from consistency. They habitually do the same thing. They see a squirrel, bam, they're out and they do the same. Even if the squirrel's not over there, they're still going to do that same thing, and it's created a pathway. And that's what happens every time we do something over and over and over. That consistency creates a pathway. So now they don't think about it. Just like you won't have to think about it because you've created that pathway, it's going to happen automatically. Freeing up your brain power for other more important things. And that is the power of consistency. Okay, so you probably have already heard me talking about this, but I want to talk just a little bit about this. Coming out soon, my new book, Consistency Matters. It is the 90-day habit-forming journal for entrepreneurs. So if you are interested in getting yourself a copy, it's not out quite yet. But here's what you can do. You can go to www.clararose.com/. Consistency Matters, and you can sign up for the wait list. And what that's going to do is as it gets closer to the book coming out, you will get an email saying, one more week or almost. And I have some fun things that I'm going to do for those who are on the wait list. Just part of that's for me to just build up the excitement. I'm always excited when a new book of mine or one of my authors comes out. It's like giving birth to a new baby, right? You've worked on it for so long and seen it come together, and it's just a cool experience. So I like to get people involved in the process, and we would love to share that with you as well. So we're a few weeks out, so now's the time to get on the waiting list. www.clararose.com/consistency matters. Get on the waiting list, and you will know as soon as the book is available and you can get it. You can get your hands on this. It's not a planner, it's a journal. So that's a little bit different. It's not like it's a calendar for the year. It is 90 days, and it is 90 days strategically and intentionally. It's because of the science behind how long it takes to truly get those new neural pathways so that it becomes a habit. So this journal is just going to help you decide what habits are important to you and then focus on them for 90 days. So getting those neural pathways in place and making it become habit for you, freeing up other space in your brain. And I'd love to have you as part of the launch team, of course. So I feel like I've shared a whole lot. So Anonymous, my friend, I hope that you can see how you can use these 3 little things to make a difference and start strong and then keep going as well. If you'd like extra help, I am always happy to chat with somebody. We can hop on a Zoom call if you need, or send me another question to hello@clararose.com. I'm always happy to do that. And of course, Anonymous, get on the checklist because this tool is going to help you to stay for the long haul. It is a journey. It's not a sprint. We only create habits through time and consistency. You can't do it for a week and think, oh, there we go, it's habit. That's just not the way that our brains work. So give yourself this gift of turning some habits into life-changing, business-changing things for you, my friends. Okay, that's it. I am Clara Rose, reminding you to write, speak, and lead because influence matters, my friend. We will see you next week.